Hello, everyone. My name is Kobe Oli, and I'm going to be talking about the Conti Ransomware Hacker Group. So, what is Conti? Conti is a Russian ransomware as a service group, um, and they're just one of the many hacker groups around the world. But they have grown into one of the largest ransomware groups in existence, um, and they are very famous for hacking the governments of Costa Rica and Peru. But also, they have hacked a lot of high high value targets, many U.S. agencies, lots of critical infrastructure like hospitals and financial systems. Um, and what is actually very interesting about Conti is that they're structured much like any other business organization. Um, they have team leaders who report to the upper management and, different teams that accomplish different tasks. And, there's horizontal information flow, which means that team interacts with other teams and help other teams out. So, you know, it's very much like a regular business. You can kind of think of Conti as a cloud provider. Just like how AWS is a cloud provider or Azure. But instead of services, ransomware is their product, and cybercrime is the industry that they're in. So you may be asking, Kobe, what is ransomware as a service? So first of all, ransomware is malware that aims to restrict access to victim systems by encrypting their files and demanding a ransom to decrypt the files and restore the system to its original state. Now, as long as that definition may sound, basically it encrypts the data or systems on your computer and demands money from you for the decryption of said systems. So that's basically what ransomware is. Ransomware as a service is an emerging trend in ransomware, and it kind of mirrors what software as a service does for regular cloud providers. And that ransomware developers distribute the ransomware that they develop and make and maintain to affiliates, who pretty much the affiliates rent out that ransomware to use against victims, and in return the ransomware developers get a share of the ransoms that the affiliates, get. Um, and what's really special about Conti is that the Conti ransomware group kind of tailors the ransomware product to its victims. So it works alongside, you know, the affiliates to kind of like best attack and, these, organizations that are, the victims. So, some examples that of like various like sophisticated, ransomware as a service strains is Revil, WannaCry, and of course Conti. They're kind of like the most sophisticated, the most dangerous ones, and are definitely gonna, hurt the business the most. So the Conti business structure. So like I was earlier saying, Conti is kind of structured like any other business would. And it's kind of separated into these main groups. So it starts with HR, which is mostly about hiring new team members. The way they do this is either through dark web forums on like Russian websites. They also what they do is they scan Russian-based um, job hiring websites, and you know they look for people with potential and contact them, and then they also conduct the interviews and make sure that these are the people that they want to have working for Conti. And then you have the coders who actually write and maintain the actual ransomware code. They're the ones that are actually writing the code. And then you have the testers. So they check that the malware is going to be good to go and protected against the known security solutions, because the victims will have security solutions, whether it's like antivirus software or just like regular defenders or ERDs. So the testers need to make sure that the malware protects against those and is actually able to execute. The cryptors work closely with the testers, but their main goal is to obfuscate the attacks. So they want to try and make sure um, that whenever the ransomware is run, that the system that is being run on doesn't detect it whatsoever. And even if they do detect it, they won't know, um, you know, critical information of Conti itself. And they work really close with the testers because the testers know about the security solutions. So the cryptors need to know about the security solutions in order to, correctly obfuscate. The sysadmins are the ones that set up the actual attack infrastructure and provide support for the other teams. And then the reverse engineers are the ones that look at the existing tools to understand how they work. And then the offensive team is the team that actually attacks a victim's machines. We can think of this as the your red team. They're the ones that's actually executing and going through the actual attack itself. And then the one that like you probably don't know as well is an OSINT specialist. So once a ransomware is run and we have the victim's files encrypted, the Conti OSINT specialist, they're going to be the ones that are going to be making the demands, and they're going to be negotiating with the victim to try and get money out of them and secure a deal. So they're the ones that like are able to interact, and they're kind of like the people that make the money that seal the deal, I guess. So how does the Conti ransomware work? So first of all, it's like any other code. It's written in a language, so it's written in C++, and it's built to attack the Windows 10 platform, whether it's the server base or the actual desktop base. And it's you can kind of think of it as broken up into six folders really. But so the Conti is the main folder, which holds everything, and split up into three folders. So then you have the builder folder, which is the one that's going to be obfuscating the API calls, making sure that whatever the APIs that are being called aren't known to the victim. Then we have the locker, which holds the keys for the encryption. Those keys are really important to make sure that the victim does not get, because that's how the ransomware really works, is that you encrypt something and you know the keys, but then the victims do not. So then in that locker folder, we have the Cha-Cha-20 algorithm, which is basically handles the encryptions of the files. Cha-Cha-20 is an AES-based algorithm, and it's pretty secure, and there's no really backdoor or way to easily brute force through it. And then the anti-hook is what handles the API unhooking, and I'll go further into that in the next slide. So this is kind of how the Conti ransomware executes. So we're going to start with the infected device and go from there. So what first happens is API hashing. So the API hashing is when it's dynamically loaded and hashes the APIs in order to hide the libraries and API names, so that people after the attack, when they reverse engineer the ransomware, they aren't able to actually find the API calls and where everything is being sent to. Next is the API unhooking. So many antivirus software solutions have protection systems that protect systems in real time by monitoring for suspicious behavior and for unknown API calls, and it attempts to inject its code into the malware processes, which performs a Windows API hooking. The API unhooking aims to disable all API hooks on all the libraries used by the ransomware. So once both the API hashing and API unhooking happens, that's when we try and create a mutex. So the ransomware tries to create a obfuscated mutex so that it will prevent two instances of the ransomware running simultaneously. This can happen when during the entry into the infected system, two people on the same system click on that same phishing email. Now you have two of the ransomware executables, and if they run at the same time, sometimes they can interact with each other and kind of mess each other up. So we only want one of them running. So that's what the mutex does. The deleting of the shadow copies. So what this does is tries to delete all the system shadow copies before encrypting the files to maximize the damage done. And that's also kind of like what the kill running processes also does, is that it's just trying to maximize the amount of damage done, and deleting those shadow copies and killing the running processes really stops any files from, like, say, being locked from encryption. And then lastly, the last thing that happens is the file encryption, which encrypts the files. It's multi-threaded, so it happens very, very fast, and it uses the Cha-Cha-20 algorithm. And it encrypts all the local files, and then once all that is done, it tries to encrypt the share files on the network. So it tries to search through the network and try and find those shared files and see. They're trying to encrypt anything and everything in the system. And once that is done, then you have a fully encrypted device, and then we can go on to the ransom part. So what does an attack look like? So we looked at the actual ransomware itself, but let's look what an attack really looks like. And it all starts with initial access. The ransomware needs to be installed on the PC. The way that's done is, through various means, but the two main ones is through stolen RDP credentials, which is remote desktop protocol. This happens when people have very weak credentials for their RDP, or it's just kind of found through other means. And the second way it's also done is through phishing emails, emails that are sent to people that have malicious attachments or links that are able to install that ransomware onto the victim's computer or server. So once the initial access is kind of created, that's when the ransomware is deployed and executed. So we kind of just went over how the ransomware works and how it's executed. But the kind of result of that is that the Conti ransomware can stop up to 146 Windows services related to security, backup, database, and email solutions through the use of NetStop. So pretty much it brings your whole entire system to a halt. Once that is done, once the files are encrypted and your system is pretty much useless, that's when the demands are made and the negotiations are done. And Conti is not one that goes to attack your small mom and pop organizations / businesses. They go for very large, high priority targets. And so, like, in a recent attack, Conti Group demanded a $7 million ransom, which was then negotiated down to $2.6 million. I believe this was for a financial institution. But that's on the lower end of what the Conti Group demands. Some of the ransom demands for, like, government systems have been high as $25 million. So if that ransom is successful, the ransom is distributed between the affiliates and Conti. And what's kind of unique about Conti, kind of goes into the kind of business side of it, is that the Conti developers pay the deployers a wage rather than a percent of the proceeds. So they're actually, rather than the deployers actually getting percent of that ransom and the developers getting, another percent, they're actually paid, like, an hourly wage for what they're doing, which is very not common in the cybercrime community. So these are all the techniques. This can be found on the MITRE ATTANCK website about Conti. And this is just a list of the different techniques that are used. I can go over all of these, but that would take way, way too long. But as you can see, the ransomware is, one, very complex, and two, very dangerous. It pretty much brings your system to a full lockdown. You can barely use it, and it's very effective in what it does, based off the structure of the ransomware and how up to date it's kept. So yeah. So Conti. So with this in mind, they have had a very large impact over the last few years. Over 700 profile groups have been impacted by Conti. Like I said, they're not attacking mom and pop organizations. They're attacking governments. They're attacking financial institutions. They're attacking things that are like worth a lot and are very critical to the way our society works. And another thing to keep in mind is that they are Russian-backed groups. So unsurprisingly, most of their targets are Western and North American groups. And I said this before, but they are one of the most aggressive and profitable ransomwares. They charge the most out of most pretty much all organizations. And their demands range from a few $100,000 to millions and millions of dollars. And another thing to note is that they're actively involved in the current Ukrainian war. They declare themselves supporting the Russians, and they have said that anyone that intervenes with the Russian infrastructure and the Russian cyberspace will feel their wrath, essentially. So, you're probably thinking to yourself, Kobe, how do I protect myself? So most of the mitigations involve preventing the initial access. If the ransomware doesn't have access to the system, it can't execute. And that's how we best can prevent it. So there's a lot of ways that we can, help mitigate this. One is through multi-factor authentication. This, especially for the remote access, this makes sure that, your credentials are, very strong. And even if they do get a hand on your credentials, you also have another way of authenticating, versus like through your phone or through like a RSA stick. So multi-factor authentication would really helps with the remote access for the RDP credentials. And then secondly, anti-phishing softwares. There's lots of softwares that help with anti-phishing, both in teaching users how to recognize phishing emails, as well as just recognizing those phishing emails and deleting them or sending them to spam. So those are both of those are very important, as well as just ensuring that user accounts are secure, using strong passwords, making sure that users are not storing their passwords anywhere. All of this is going to help that preventing that initial access. Other than preventing the initial access, another good thing to make sure is that keeping all your software up to date and always scanning for vulnerabilities is very important. Keeping your software up to date is going to limit what the ransomware is going to have access to, because the more out of date software it has, the more vulnerabilities that there will be, and the more that can be exploited. And lastly, you definitely want to implement an endpoint and detection response, or an EDR tools. Because although the ransomware prevents the hooking of the APIs, EDR tools really allow a high degree of visibility into the security status of endpoints, and it can really help protect against malicious cyber actors. And it's definitely a good idea to implement. So, just probably around like 7 months ago now, on February 27th, 2022, a Twitter account named Conti Leaks leaked thousands of Jabber Rocket chat messages, which is the way that Conti used to chat, as well as the source code for the Conti ransomware. This is how we know how the Conti ransomware works, and also how we know the kind of business organization of Conti. And a lot of people have done research papers about the ransomware itself, Conti, the organization, and a lot of light has been shown on Conti. This was due to backlash from Conti publicly declaring their allegiances to Russia during the Ukrainian war. We are assuming that Conti Leaks is a Ukrainian sympathizer / supporter, and didn't agree with Conti backing the Russians. So he went rogue and leaked all of this to the public. So in the aftermath of the leak, Conti members took a break for 2 to 3 months to regroup and reorganize, but they still remained operational. And they were still updating the ransomware and distributing it. They just took a break to reorganized after everything had been leaked. But this doesn't mean that they were all fine and dandy after the leak. A lot of employees actually moved to other, hacker organizations because of the leak, or they quit due to the leak, um, just because they weren't really sure about the organization beforehand, and then after the leak, they felt that they were too at risk. So Conti is, even though it's been rather absent in the last few months, they're still very alive and very well, and will likely to continue to be in the future. Um, they're making plans to create a crypto exchange in the internal network so that people in their business can exchange crypto, which is very important for interacting on the dark web. They're also in the process of creating a darknet social network, which you can see in the picture to the right, which is a kind of like sketch drawing of it. Um, so they have large plans for the future, and like I said, they're very much like a business, so they're always trying to grow. Um, and as ransomware and cybercrime become more and more sophisticated and complex, we are likely to see not just Conti growing, but also groups just like Conti appearing in the future. Um, a recent study showed that, right now the ransomware industry is a $20 billion industry, and they estimate by like 2035 it's going to be close to around 300 billion. So it's a rapidly growing industry, and it's very successful. So that's what all I have for you today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good day. And these are some references if you want to look at these. Very informative about Conti. Yeah, thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.